It could be episode 5. In this episode, we dive deep into a common trap that we all tend to fall into, the tendency to get lost in the stories of our struggles. From constantly analyzing the past to getting caught up in the whys and hows, we often overlook the solution right in front of us. I'm Izit Galu, and in this episode, I'll explain how focusing on the problem itself and getting lost in the past can prevent us from moving forward. It's time to change our mindset. Real change can only happen in the present. Let's leave the past behind and take steps toward a solution today. Before we jump into the video, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and check out the other episodes. The trap of losing yourself in stories, the false perception. People tend to obsess over their problems, attributing meaning to the natural ups and downs in the process. I was fine yesterday, I felt a bit bad around evening and this morning. They often say, this is negative self-talk that we receive from within. Problem-focused thinking creates problems. Interpretation is a swamp. Interpretation does not heal. When the mind is preoccupied with questions like, is it because of this or that, it cannot focus on a solution. The primary reason why many people struggle in the process is exactly this. So what if it's because of this or that? What's done is done. The tree has been planted. Whether Ollie or Veli planted it doesn't matter. What matters is grabbing the axe and starting to cut the tree. The main reason why people in the process get lost in the story of the problem is the industry itself. The specialist's job is to dissect the problem. The common tendency to analyze problems by saying, this issue stems from a behavior in childhood, has taught people to focus on problem dissection. But so what if it's because of this or that? Yesterday is in the past. There's no chance to go back and relive everything. If you trace a psychological issue back to something 30 years ago, today's problem won't be solved. If, for example, someone finds a lighter that causes a forest fire, the fire doesn't end by blaming the lighter or matches. This is often done as a tactic to gain time and extend the session. After all, there's a lot of material in the past. It's also easy. You can keep the client talking, and you, like a prosecutor, just ask questions. It feeds the ego. By talking about elementary school days, you can gain 30 extra sessions. Moreover, linking a current psychology issue to causes 20 to 30 years ago, saying, this comes from that, this comes from this, is just making an interpretation. There is no scientific foundation or value in that. What if it doesn't come from that? How could anyone know that? Can therapy and treatment be based on interpretation, assumption, and guesswork? Don't get lost in stories. It doesn't matter who planted the tree or whether the fire started from a match or lighter. What's done is done. Yesterday is in the past. Grab the hose, run to put out the fire. Grab the axe, start cutting the tree. What difference does it make? Take your umbrella and walk under it with joy. Dissecting emotions is a swamp. Making interpretations is a swamp. Talking about the past constantly is a trap. They say that a bankrupt shopkeeper always goes through old records. In my 25 years of professional life, except for exceptional cases, I rarely listen to stories. I didn't find it necessary. Problem-focused thinking feeds the problem. One should not get trapped in how or why the situation occurred and lose themselves in stories. This is another flawed approach we need to abandon. Causes are usually triggering factors. Sustaining factors are often something entirely different. Getting lost in stories from years ago, focusing on what triggered the issue, is often a tactic for prolonging the session. As I said, there's a lot to talk about from the past. The question of how and why a psychology issue arises is something that scientists should address. Our task is to focus directly on the solution. We must be alert to the subtle game of our brain trying to pull us into the story of the process, distracting us and scattering our energy. A doctor tells Mustafa Kemal, "Sir, you have cirrhosis." Mustafa Kemal's response is very meaningful. "All right, doctor, now tell me the solution." He doesn't waste his time and energy asking questions like, "Why did this happen? Are you sure? How did this happen? Was it because of this or that?" He immediately focuses on the solution, almost like a hawk. The industry's widespread approach of constantly probing the past makes people more likely to get preoccupied with the story of their problems. Don't overthink, or you'll lose your mind. The perception trap. there's no one who hasn't received this suggestion. It has made us overly sensitive to both the quantity and quality of our thoughts. Most importantly, it has directed our attention toward thinking itself. Overthinking doesn't make you smarter. If it did, philosophers would all be mentally ill. We will think. We'll do it relentlessly, without worrying about how much or how little. Everything wears out with too much use, and the brain wears out with too little. Overcome your fears, the perception trap. Recently, certain schools of thought have become more prominent with phrases like overcome your fears, free yourself from your fears, and liberate yourself from fear. This kind of programming teaches us to fear fear itself and turns it into a monster in our minds. But is it really possible to be free from fear? And are our fears the true problem that we need to cleanse ourselves from? After all, only fools and the dead do not fear. Almost everyone, including experts, believes that the thing holding us back is our fears. That's why experts try to free us from our fears with statements like, "Don't be afraid," or "Get rid of your fears." But the truth is, it's not our fears that hold us back. Throughout history, many soldiers, despite their fears, have charged at the enemy like panthers. What influences and restricts us is not the fear itself, but the fear of fear. Fear doesn't block us, the fear of fear does. Portraying fear as an obstacle to everything in life teaches us to fear fear itself. As you know, not everyone is equally frightened by the same fear. Can the fear felt by someone who sees fear as normal and human be the same as the fear of someone who says, "Oh no, I'm so scared"? On the other hand, fear doesn't prevent work or action, movement. Today, countless people are working, despite their fear. If fear prevented people from fighting, humanity would have had difficulty finding soldiers throughout history. We don't imagine that all the warriors in history were fearless heroes. As seen, the world is filled with faulty perceptions. If our perceptions are distorted in nearly every area, can we really have a healthy perspective on psychology, treatment, and therapy? Perception is like the filter through which we sift everything. If the filter is broken, is it possible for what passes through it to be what we want? The perception of overzealous volunteerism. When people go through a process, they often believe that the more they do, the faster they will improve. However, what we truly need is not doing more, but doing fewer things with accuracy and correctness. When drinking from a spring, it's important not to stir the water by wandering around aimlessly. It's crucial not to destroy what's being built while working on it. Therefore, the goal should not be to do more, but to do fewer, more meaningful, and correct things. What we browse on social media and who programs our minds and subconscious is crucial. Expert posts like, "If this is present, your problem is this. If that's present, your problem is that," create a symptom-disease connection and foster the belief that I am sick, while also increasing our sensitivity. These actions contribute to shaping and feeding our psychology. It's important to protect ourselves. Just as we don't eat everything that's put in front of us, we shouldn't fill our minds and souls with every piece of information or stimulus that comes our way. Our stomach, mind, and subconscious are not trash bins. If we turn them into garbage dumps, we shouldn't be surprised when decay and unpleasant odors arise. We must never forget that these problems have increased alongside the growth of the industry, becoming more widespread in parallel with the rise in the number of experts. The eyes are the windows to the brain's house, and the ears are its door. A house that has its windows and doors constantly open, turning into a passageway, cannot maintain peace or hygiene. Our mistake of disregarding the cause. Disregarding the cause and only focusing on the outcome leads to an incomplete interpretation of the process, causes us to perceive the psychology we experience as pathological, and fuels the perception of danger. For example, we might say, "I feel so bored, doctor." When we perceive it as having no cause, the brain interprets it as a danger. If there's no obvious reason, the brain associates it with illness. However, when we remember the cause, such as saying, "I'm bored because I broke up with my partner," the situation suddenly changes. If you don't send the necessary stimuli to the brain at the right time, the brain won't respond. We might say, "I've been feeling bad for 2 days." When we connect it to a cause like, because my friends have been distant, the situation takes on a completely different dimension for the brain. I haven't been able to sleep for 2 days when we say this and then add, because I have unresolved problems in my mind. Our psychological reaction will change instantly. When there's a cause, the result is normal. However, even if there is a cause, we often have a strange tendency to perceive the result as abnormal and complain about it. For instance, I can't sleep because of my stress. Stressful moments aren't the times to sleep peacefully. You don't sleep on the battlefield. The priority in a battlefield is not to sleep or be happy, it's to survive. If you sleep on the battlefield, you die. You have to wait for the right things in the right place and time. You don't expect summer in winter. You don't plant seeds in winter. You don't harvest crops in winter. Our expectations must be realistic. Many people, due to this faulty perception, complain about the natural outcomes of their most human processes, thereby exaggerating the most natural processes in their minds and souls. Wait, but wait in the right place and at the right time. Wait, but make sure your expectations are realistic. Also, most people think that mental states follow a stable course and that this is what is normal. However, as I mentioned earlier, every emotional state that develops due to a cause is normal. Being normal doesn't mean our emotional comfort always stays on the same track. Being normal means responding appropriately to the situation and time. It's normal to cry at a funeral and to laugh at a wedding. A mental change that disrupts emotional comfort doesn't always mean a disorder or a problem in psychology. Remember, the most ancient principle is, if there's a disease, there is treatment. Even a doctor doesn't just look at symptoms, they first conduct tests. If there's no disease, they won't proceed with treatment. What tests have you had? What's your illness? Then what are you trying to treat? When will you realize that they've dressed the lamb in a wolf's skin and sent you to war with your most human emotions? Other common mistakes we make. Our culture of insistence, for example. Even for something as simple as refusing a cup of tea while visiting, we have to say no at least 3 times. Over time, this wears and suffocates the soul. Insistence weakens the psychological resistance and makes us more prone to problems. Our habit of making long sentences and unnecessary explanations whenever we feel the need to explain something. Even if someone simply asks, "How are you?" we respond by writing an epic. However, the answer to "How are you?" is simply, "I'm fine" or "I'm not well." Our lack of a culture of debate. We see debate as a battle to dominate, instead of saying, "This is my opinion, and that's yours, I respect it," and ending the matter there. Lack of rules and principles. Lack of rules and principles leads to uncertainty. Uncertainty causes emotional ups and downs, which gradually harms the mind and the soul. Emotion-focused thinking. The belief that every action is based on emotions. However, the nature of actions should be based on principles and rules, not on the changing nature of emotions. All of these and similar perceptions pollute our minds, exhaust our souls, and make our brains overly sensitive to our psychological states. Our emotional tolerance decreases, and our psychological fragility increases. That's the end of part 5 of It Could Be. I hope this chapter has shed some light on the common misconceptions and traps we often fall into on our psychological journeys. As always, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out the other videos in the series. There's plenty of valuable content coming your way, and I don't want you to miss it. See you in the next video, and keep questioning your perceptions. Until then.